My name is Chris with Balloon Innovations. I want to talk to you a little bit about our new Magneclick system and how it can be incorporated into our showroom balloon displays. We have two different types of magnets. The white magnets here are rated to 12 pounds on a gridded ceiling system. And the black ones here are rated at 14 pounds, and that's on, the tile ceiling gridded ceilings. I say that because if you're using an exposed like I-beam type of ceiling, it can hold a lot more weight, possibly up to about 20 pounds with the black magnets. It's pretty straightforward. We have an installer head here as well, and I'll kind of tell you how they work. I recommend the white magnets for everything but the big spirals and 30-inch balls. It's sufficient strength to hold up the clusters, the flakes, and even mylars if we incorporate that into the showrooms. The black one should really be used just for the 30-inch balls and the spirals. And with those spirals above the 30-inch balls, try not to go more than 3. We could probably get away with 4, but if we're going to do more than that, we probably have to run a line from the magnet down through the top of the spiral balloons and back up to the ceiling, so there's a little bit more pull strength up there to work with that arrangement. So it's pretty simple. I'm going to get an extension pole here and put this on and just kind of show you how the magnet works. Just take this, it'll be in a little baggie like this when you get it. There's also instructions in it if you want to refer to those for a little extra assistance, but find any old painter's pole. We also use these, as you know, to measure the height of all the displays, make sure that they're kind of even across the showrooms. Just screw this onto the pole here. You can go out to your different lengths. You're going to take a magnet. So here is the Magneclick installer head, and you can see there's a little bit of a recessed area here, a divot, where the bump in the middle of the magnet that holds the ring will fit into. And then there's another recessed part behind it that the curve of the ring will sit in, and the line will just follow down this groove, and at the end of it will be your carabiner or your cluster that you're hanging up onto the ceilings. So this little nub right there pops into the head. It's on there fairly securely. Then the ring will sit in there and your line will come right down. I have one that's set up with the fishing line right now, so I'll show you how that looks. So this has the line tied on it. If you can, it might be a good idea to make a knot so it's a little bit further away from the ring, and I'll show you why. When you put this on here, the ring sits in that recessed area, but if there's a big knot here, it might stay a little bit higher. If you can get the knot down past this groove or to sit in the groove, it'll stay a little bit more securely when you put it up to the ceiling. Not a big deal. We'll probably change the mold a little bit to have a little area in there in the future for a knot. But then just screw this whole apparatus onto your extension pole and we can lift it up to the ceiling. Okay, so we're just going to screw the installer head on here. You could probably do this ahead of time. You don't need to put the magnet on and then the installer head, obviously. But it's ready to go. It's kind of secure on here. You got your line. Just kind of run the line down. Keep it taut as you lift up the pole. We're going to use at least for now, we're going to use a carabiner system at the bottom of these. So this carabiner will click onto a cluster, which we'll get to the cluster creation here in a little bit, and then we can just hoist it up to the ceiling. So you could just put up the carabiners and then go up your ladder with the clusters. You could probably also just lift up the whole clusters already on here to the ceiling. I think that getting everything in place and bringing up the clusters is probably a better idea. Bring up the clusters after the fact. So I'm just clicking on the carabiner onto this cluster. You want to keep the clusters, because of this material, keep them in fairly clean place. If you can put them on even a car or on a table or something, it's better than on the floor. I don't have one. I guess I do have one available here, but for your purposes, demo purposes, this will work. So we're just going to extend the pole out here and I'm sorry, this line should stay taut like I told you before. Extend it up find the best place to mount it. You're not going to run into too much pipe work like this, but you know, it might be just a ceiling tile grid. Just slowly get up there and let it click on, and should be pretty secure. Whenever you need to take it down, just go back up to that ring there and pop it through. Make sure it snaps into place so it's secured and isn't going to fall when you take it down. Just give it a little pull and you can remove the whole arrangement. Okay, so there you have it. As far as the magnet system is concerned, it's really just 3 parts right now. We may have a double-headed system in the future to put up 2 magnets at once for increased strength and holding taller spirals and stuff in the system. But here is the installer head. Another feature of this, I'll come up here and show you. One other feature of this is, if it's a little bit loose, you can turn this around. It's much like a, you know, putting a tire on a bike with a quick release type of system. You can then get a couple angles. If you need to get at something over a vehicle, you might find it best to kind of change the angle on this installer head. And then just make sure you lock it down and it'll be into place. That's pretty much it. Any extension painter's pole here. The 2 magnets here come in boxes of 8. We're going to just ship boxes of 8 to you, so just keep some extras on hand and try to just always use the white ones. They're a little bit more cost effective for us, for the company, to use the white ones for the smaller clusters. They're more than adequate, and then the black ones just for the big balls. Let us know what you need for your display and we'll get it out to you, and that's pretty much it. Okay, now I want to talk to you about how to put one of our new cluster manifolds together with the balloons. Really, there's just a couple parts to it. You're going to get, these won't come pre-assembled, most likely. So you'll get this T-tube part. We're trying to get the terminology down here too. So this is T-tube. These are rings of 5, or a 5-port manifold. 2 of these rings are going to connect on the ends of the T-tube to make the whole manifold. Once they're connected together, it's very hard to get them apart. They shouldn't need to come apart, and they will pretty much last forever. You're going to keep the same thing in the showroom that whole time. So it just goes over one end. There's kind of a round section on the T-tube here, and there's a slot on one half of the 5-port manifold here. So just pop that in there so it's a nice little fit. Find the half circle on the other side of the manifold. Line up the little connecting points in the manifold. And then what I usually do is just find 2 of these ports and kind of snap it together. You hear that snap? Now it's locked. This part is good to go from here on out. Each one has a rubber insert in the 5 different ports here. I think those should be good to go for a long, long time. Shouldn't leak or anything. We do insert them into the parts before they're sent out to you. Then this T-tube has the final 2 ports that come out the ends. Kind of call these the 2 rings of 5, and then the buds are at the end. Another thing to note, you probably can't tell here in the video, but on the T-tube it says side A, and on the other side it says side B. We're going to give you instructions as to where to put the balloons. Each one of these 5-port manifolds have a number engraved into them too. There's let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we might say A1 needs a yellow, A2 needs a blue, etc., etc. So you know exactly how we would like them arranged in the showrooms. I know that when we're doing a 3-color cluster, we like to have 2 of the same color that are always kind of next to each other, and two balloons in that same color shouldn't touch the other 2 balloons of that color. So if I'm doing 2 yellow there, I'm going to need 2 yellow on the other side. Again, you don't have to pay too much attention to this because we're going to give you the exact placement for all of these balloons. So let me just put put all these on here. It helps to kind of twist them as they go on. They go on a lot easier, and if you're going to take them off, you know, a twist off is good as well. There is a housing inside them. It helps a little bit to just kind of, you know, push on the back of that. Make sure that this sharp tip doesn't get through the end of the housing and create, you know, maybe a cut in the balloon. So we'll just push these on. It's possible you could use a little bit of water to help them go on, but we prefer you don't, just so that it limits the ability for them to slip off when they're pressurized. We add the air into the system. Want to push them on as tight as you can. As you do these over time, you'll kind of figure out how far you need to go on, and if it's really necessary to go on all the way versus, you know, maybe just part of the way. So this is how my arrangement's going to be with all the colors in place. I intentionally put on these the balloons on the bud, or the very last of the T-tube balloons, just so I could make sure all the colors were on there correctly. But to start off, we don't need those on the last T-tube connections. You can see you have a ring of 5 here. This one's open, so where the T-tube is. On the other side, a ring of 5, and this one is open. We're going to start by inflating one ring, we'll do the other ring, and then finally the T-tube, which blows up 2 at once. It's not tricky, but it's a little bit trickier than doing the others. So you'll have your compressor with you. We have a compressor, you know, behind us to pressurize air to blow these things up. One thing you want to do is either have some water nearby, possibly even oil, or just use saliva to just kind of get something on the needle so it slips into the rubber inserts a little bit easier and doesn't tear them. Just allows your work to be a little bit easier. So I'm gonna get a little saliva on there, and then we'll go into the first one here. You're going to just kind of figure out the right size over time, you know, with these balloons. Just want to obviously make them tight. And one key is to get them all about the same size. You know, if you make them a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, just try to do it consistently as you can across the whole manifold. Try to hold them while you're inflating them too, so that they're kind of a sticky material, as you may know from the durable balloons outside. They will kind of cling on to each other. So just try to keep them a little bit separated when you inflate each one. You know, it never hurts to have a little extra saliva on the needle too as you're going through these, or, you know, a bucket of water that you can just moisten up the needle. So as I'm doing this, I'm kind of wiggling them around, make sure that they're not stuck on each other. Ready to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, there's a problem that we encounter. Sometimes these rubber inserts will pull out of the manifold. It's really easy to push them back in, but if you find that this happens, we're working on fixing, you know, the problem. You can just kind of squeeze them and push them back into place. When they come out of the mold, when they are made, they have a little bit of silicone on them, so it makes them kind of slippery. We're trying to get that off of them when they are put in there so that they don't pop out. But if you find that that happens, just keep a finger tip on the end of it while the needle's in there, and it'll prevent it from popping out. So I will try that again. And also keeping that water or saliva or some sort of little oil on the needle will help prevent it from slipping that rubber insert in the manifolds out as well. So one thing I realized when I was inflating this cluster is that I was overinflating all the balloons, and I could tell because it was getting really tight when I was trying to finish off the last of this second row of 5. I've left this yellow one kind of tight just to show you, if you overinflate them by accident, it'll take a little bit until you figure out exactly how big these things need to be. Won't be a problem from there. But one way of deflating the balloons is just take one of the cheap needles that we have here. We'll send some out to you. Get a little bit of wetness on there, and stick it right into the rubber valve. It'll just let some of the air out. It usually deflates pretty quickly. Get it down to the size that you need. That's probably good. You just pull that needle back out. Like I said before, if these rubber inserts are kind of coming out, try to keep a finger on it, while you pull this out, just so you don't lose that rubber insert and have to put it back in. So we're almost there. We just need to do these last 2. One thing I will point out is we're getting these new needles. If you've used the old needles in the past, they're really cheap. The front portion of this needle is just kind of pressure fit in there, and it can fall out, and then they're useless, or they just break, if you're too sideways when you're putting them into the port. So the new needles are all one piece of metal. They're kind of just shaved out, molded. They won't break. They're a lot stiffer. So we'll send those out to you. That's what I recommend using for all of our service needs out in the field. I'll finish off these last 2. And then we'll do the final 2 on the T-tube. You can see right here it's kind of catching on the other balloons. You need to be conscious of that and make sure that while you're inflating, these things aren't sticking too much together. The problem with that is they could stick onto another balloon and pull it off of the whole manifold. When we seat them into place, we make a little bit more room. Here's the final balloon. These might still be a little bit overinflated, but we'll try to work with it. Just keep an eye for all the other balloons, if it looks like anything is pushing any of the others off. That's probably about good there. So right now I have 2 sides, 2 rings of 5, and then the open final ones. The final 2 are going to be inflated with the T-tube, and you just inflate in the top of that, inflates the other ones. So I will push them onto place. That one's in there. That one's in there. Go right into the top inflation area. This you want to be take special attention to, because you really don't want these balloons to be pushing off any of these other 5. So as you're inflating it, just kind of move it around a bit. You can go a little, then just kind of you know, push it off to the side. It may reset the other balloons into their places as well. That's probably good for there. Now with these last two, it's also going to be inflating the other one on the other side, which is this guy. We can see this guy is getting kind of big. We need to make sure it's not pushing off any of the other balloons. It's a good idea to peek in there and just make sure all of the other balloons are still kind of good and in place on their port. Okay. This one, the problem with this is the last two, they're inflating two at once. So one could end up being bigger than the other. This one seems a little bit bigger than this original one. I'm just going to go a little bit further, try to get this a little bit bigger. That's about good. Pull my needle out. Then just go over the whole cluster so that we can, you know, make sure that, you know, there isn't any gaps in them. They're not pushing each other off. You know, all the ports are looking good. This is a really nice tight cluster. It looks great. I don't think it's pushing any of the other ones off. There's a loop on the end of the manifolds here. We're going to put a carabiner on our line onto that loop, and it'll go right up to the ceiling. We can keep the carabiners up there most of the time and just walk up the ladder, one finger in this loop to hold it, and just pop it onto the carabiner. Again, I think they could be a little bit smaller than this, but this is working right now, and you know, if there's any problems, one might pop. We can just replace that one instead of having the whole manifold deflate like our previous system. One other thing to point out is when you're inflating any of these all look like good balloons, but we have found in the past, you can see like a little thin spot or dimple on the balloons. You can actually see kind of a dimple when it's deflated, or you can see a thin spot when it's inflated. That you gotta, you know, be careful of. If you see a lot of those, we might want to, you know, talk to your manager or something about getting some other ones. If they're down towards the neck, the material is thicker, it's probably not going to be a problem. But if they're right around, you know, somewhere in this vicinity of the balloon, that's really the main stretch point, and they could burst. So, you know, if you're not inflating it too tight, it doesn't feel too tight, it might not be a problem, but we put these up into the ceilings. It's a lot hotter up there. It can cause them to expand, and if they're tight already and then they have a thin spot, they could burst, and that's problematic. So that's the cluster, and any questions, email one of us, and we'll get them answered for you. So I started taking these balloons off of the manifold, and a couple things to point out. The end of these ports are kind of sharp. So you may want to wear like a thin leather glove when you're taking them off, just so that you don't cut into your hand. It could happen. We haven't done a ton of these to see, you know, it hasn't happened yet, but it could. Really, just taking them off, you just want to kind of grab this whole thing and give it a bit of a twist, and pull them right off. You know, when we do the displays, we're going to try to keep one of the colors, so we may want to keep all the blue on here, or you know, just switch the position or something. We'll let you know, so you don't have to take off as many. Probably in most cases won't have to take off 100% of them. And they're fully reusable, so we may have you pack them up in the box that they were sent to you and send back to us so that we can reuse them again. If you see issues like they get dirt on them from like being on the floor, or something happens to them while they're up, you know, salesman might draw a smiley face on them, who knows what, just throw those away. But we do probably want to reuse any of the good ones via sending them back to us, and we'll send you a shipping label or something. Okay, so now we're going to talk about our hanging column in the showrooms. That's the 30-inch ball. We call it like a 30-inch biggie, 30-inch big ball. Big something works. And with the stacks, the spiraled stacks above it. I'm going to go over the terminology of the parts, and then I'll assemble the whole thing, and you can see how it's created. This is the 30-inch ball. and there is a port for the fixtures to go into there. And I guess I'll just start creating it for you. This is what we call the 30-inch connector. So this piece has threads on it, and you're just going to twist this thing in essentially as far as you can go until it either gets too tight or just keeps spinning. Once it's down there and flush with the top of the balloon, you're pretty much good. There's a needle inflation port right there. This has two heads on it to twist lock the other parts on. It's a lot like our outdoor products that just twist lock together. So the 30-inch connector goes into the 30-inch big ball. You're then going to take what we call a spine. This is a 6-inch spine connector. That will go on it and snap it right into place. On top of the spine is going to be a 4-port kind of manifold. We also call this the spine manifold, or 4-port. And you can see in here, might be able to see, there is one longer kind of space going one way. You need to line that up with the ribs that are on the spine connector. Just push it through and it'll float freely on here. As you stack the balloons up, this might be up or down. It just kind of moves freely. Once you do a row of balloons there, you can keep going with it. Please note that you want to hold these kind of flanges on the bottom here as well as up here. It's a little bit confusing, you know, if you didn't know the part well and we're trying to take it off. Sometimes you twist on this and that part. That's all one part. It's not going to work for you. You got to have a hold on the two different flanges when you put them together and when you take them off. Anyhow, so we just kind of keep on stacking. Take this spine manifold, put that on there. That's another layer on top of it. And then when you finally get to the top, this is our hanger connector. So the hanger connector, same way, just twist locks onto this whole thing. Then you will take another one of the spine manifolds, put it over the top of that. Note that it can slip off. It's a little bit tight, but it can slip off there. So when you're hanging this thing, to make sure that it doesn't slip off, I mean, it won't go this way, but to reinsure it, you want the carabiner. When you take it out into the showroom, you can put a carabiner on it just to make sure it doesn't come off there. Take this off and then put it onto the carabiner in the showroom, or just connect two carabiners together if you want to, if they're high enough. Then the line will be tied to this. It goes up to the ceiling. The whole thing will be held this way. I'm going to go ahead and inflate all of these and just kind of show you how it's all built together. So one thing I did want to point out is while you're connecting these pieces together, there is a small little hole in them, and that's actually kind of a security feature to keep them together. You may or may not find that useful, but anyhow, you can take a small screw like this, just put it into that hole, and screw it into place. It'll always be that way. When you have the screw in there, you can't slide the pieces off without taking the screw out, so you probably need to determine what's easier for you when you assemble the whole thing. For these purposes, I'm going to leave them out just so I can connect them piece by piece and disconnect them. But if you have a hose that's flexible like this, it might be just as easy to put screws in your whole showroom display so they never come apart on you when you're trying to transport them here or there, and just use the flexible hose. It's a lot easier than a straight long one to inflate the different levels and change the colors. So one other thing to note is when you're hanging the lines, we don't exactly have a standard weight of line yet. I know we need to do probably at least 25-pound line. This is 50-pound line. What I'm getting at here is, depending on the height of your ceiling, the line's going to stretch a bit, especially with these Permashine balloons. They're just a lot heavier. You know, the cluster's about, I believe it's 3 pounds or so, or 3.5 pounds. So I believe for about every inch, or every foot rather, that you're going up to the ceiling, there's going to be about an inch of stretch to it. So if you're going up 20 feet, you know, expect close to 2 feet of stretch. So just try to make them a little bit higher than you ordinarily would, by a foot or two, so that they can kind of drop down. They'll only drop so far before they stop, and you should be good. You'll figure that out. It may depend on the quality of line as well. We might find that one brand really doesn't stretch much or something and move towards that. But as you first start doing the Permashine displays, just be conscious of that so that they're not way down where the salesman can touch them. We always want them, you know, a little bit higher, so it takes some effort to even jump up to hit the balloons, just so that we eliminate any sort of problems that, you know, could occur when we're not in the showrooms and, you know, salesmen or something are joking around and causing problems for us. So I wanted to speak to you a little bit about just some of the little things to finish off the showroom. For one, I apologize I didn't do this, but it's always a good idea to have, you know, some sort of either sunglasses on or safety glasses, because when these things pop, it's a lot more powerful than a latex balloon. And, you know, maybe you've had a 30-inch latex balloon slap you in the face before. These will help big time when they blow up, and then you won't have to be worried too much about if they do pop going in your face. So please always use safety glasses. And again, I apologize, I haven't done enough of these yet to kind of get into that routine, but it's a good practice. Let's do that. The other thing that we need to discuss is the arrangement of where the balloons go in the showrooms. Now, the standard display is going to be 8 of the clusters. It's going to be 3 of the big balls with 2 stacks above it, and then 2 of the 6 balloon kind of manifold flakes. So we're going to do 2 rows of 4, the 3 balls kind of through the 3 with the 2 stacks along the center, and then the other 2 flakes on the sides of that. That's kind of when we can, the standard showroom we want to do. We just need to space it out more to kind of fill in the showroom. If the showroom is really long, maybe kind of bring it in to focus it in the middle part of the showroom, so all the action is kind of right there, maybe by an entry or something, and don't have them too close to the ends of the showroom where, you know, they're just not having their full balloon potential down there. So we'll give you a diagram of that. You can look this over. And some other techniques are, if there's like kind of a square space, sometimes they want you to do a showroom display by the parts area or service. You might want to do 1 cluster in the center, and then, you know, 4 flakes around the side of it, or just 2 flakes. Or, you know, if it's low ceilings, just 1 level high above the 30-inch ball, and, you know, 2 or 4 flakes around that area to kind of just add a little attention there. We try to do everything we can symmetrical. So try to even everything off as much as you can, and no obstacles will be in the way, that type of thing. But the other thing is, a lot of these dealers, that's the standard display that we're going to sell them originally. A lot of the dealers are going to want to expand, you know, the balloons out. So you just got to be creative, try to be symmetrical, you know, expand things so that they stay in that same symmetry throughout the whole showroom there. A lot of times we will not be able to get into the showrooms to kind of give you assistance as to where these things go. So, you know, ask us questions if you need to. Google Maps, fortunately, will allow us to get into the showroom sometimes and kind of look around and give you advice on that. But it's really just a matter of spacing these things out. I know if you've done latex in the past, we've done a lot more than we're going to be doing with these, but we don't think that it's necessary to just congest the whole showroom full of balloons. Just a little color here or there will be sufficient. So if any questions, you know, let us know on that as far as the layout's concerned. But you know, it's kind of up to you to design the showrooms and take some pictures if you can, send them to us. We can give you some ideas of anything that might need to change. I've also noticed in some of the newer showrooms, there's a thin kind of bracing, kind of the grid that holds the tiles in the ceiling in. So in those thin ones, I see them in a lot of Nissan dealerships. we may want to put a piece of tape on top of the magnet system we talked to you before about, and the magnet will push that tape. It's a VHB 3M tape up onto the ceiling to give it a good firm hold. And we haven't had too much of a problem with, you know, those coming down. If we need to, maybe we do 2 magnets with the tape. It is a good idea when possible to maybe set the magnets a day prior, let them kind of get that good hold, and then come back and put in all the balloons. I know that's not always possible, but if we do have the time to do the magnets one week, the second week we put in all the balloons, in that type of a situation where we have to use a tape, that would work. You don't always have to use the magnets either. You could certainly kind of throw you know, balloon or something filled up over a pipe and kind of do a slip knot to get those a good firm hold. We will have some other decorations too that I haven't touched on today. We can make kind of some towers from the floor up. We might be able to get into the arches. We need to test that a little bit more. Should be right around the corner, and we'll let you know when we can do those things and when your salesperson starts selling that type of an arrangement. So thanks a lot, guys. Again, any questions, let us know, and good luck with things.